Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 8th of January, and well, what have we got here? Monday gave us push up to the 50%, almost a retrace down to the 38. But what we've got, bullish with the orange having dipped below, followed by what might be considered a bit of weakness where you have the cyan rising, which means shorts are just rising into this as we're reaching that 50%. It's not necessarily bearish just because you still have the green over red. However, that orange minus 655 is now above green, effectively ending the power of the long per se. You would need probably another reset pivot. The strength still exists in the steel though, because it doesn't dip below the 7.5. As soon as that happens, we're at 951 on the steel right now, so it's doing okay, but that's going to make it tough to break past the 50. Now, if it gets past the 50, I think that boom, we got 2600, and then again the old algo lines that we had from way back will come into play quite significantly. But this seems to be at this particular point pretty hard resistance. We might get a little bit of softness inside of there. It's worth knowing that. I mean, that's where I like to, well, I'll pop up a 50K chart. That's still a 5K, and that's 50K, which would help if we were in current, and just like that. Oh yeah, we can see that we did have this quite nice setup from there. What was that, a buy at 2468? Where did it end up going to? 51. Wow, so that's a pretty significant move. 2468, almost made it to 2560, made it to 2550, so 90 plus point on that capture. What this reflects though is that 50K, the magenta ones again are just when magenta of the shakeout reaches peak point. And like we were talking about through most of the day, and it was quite poignant because we ended up with this exact situation. In order to stay in some of these long setups without getting stopped out on some of these spikes, was to recognize that if your histogram, the little pop-up lines, and it depends on if you turned your colors on or not, but otherwise it would be white, otherwise normal. If it's below the magenta, then you know that you pretty much ended your run. That happens, well, right about here as we got this signal just a little bit ago, which makes sense why it would go ahead and exit that setup. But anyway, getting back to it with the NQ, likewise situation. So markets are pretty much equalized, which is a good thing because it means that you get a consistency. The Dow was acting a little odd in relation to, but again, when you're dealing with the 30 over, 500 and the NASDAQ, you're looking at a much bigger range. This pop in the euro bizarre when you saw that Germany had horrible growth numbers as far as their factory orders and that. So kind of interesting that it would even be this elevated given how pathetic the Eurozone is in relation to at least the United States growth. And gold from a step is okay, so I've put the experimental pink bar that I've been working with on this that has it, and you can see we've gotten into that strong run, so you get this configuration right here. The first thing you realize is, oh, nope, I'm still above it. So gold's run is not done. Yeah, that rhymes. Gold's run is not done. I like that. Turning to the intraday action, it was quite fun. We started off after the brief run up, hitting up against that 2548. I talked about this short as it was happening on our previous video, and it came down and we looked at the configurations about how it had converted into a buy from this particular point once that steel crosses. Now, just because that's converted into it doesn't mean it's an actual buy. You really need to have that green over red, and particularly the orange moving below does that right at the 23% range. But you had your heads up earlier to go ahead and say, hey, if I get that cross, I can go ahead and pop out of that. We had converted that in long, right about there, and it was scratchy back and forth. And you're going to get that with longs. This is one of those where if you're not comfortable having your stop there, a lot of times even the ABM on the resets is going to take, it's going to go up too quickly. Because a lot of times they're building a position over time. In this particular case, though, it got all the way up near the 50%, and I was like, okay, we're starting to see more and more weakness from that signaling, and then sure enough, it got down here, but there you go, you activate the buy setup, and then boom, it did dip below, but this one was really sketchy from a real deep move here on the shakeout, and you also had this lovely dip below the red line, something that I'm going to be incorporating in that just pink bar. It's like, okay, well that just means that this low's got to get revisited. It is on the next bar, but oftentimes when you have this first move down, I'm looking for the second pivot as being the powerful one, and boom, you hit the P2, good signaling, and that one's the one that actually took off to get positive extreme going up through there. Retraced a little bit before putting in another solid buy configuration on the little reset, and that's the one that started to take off, and that's when we were starting, and I had posted exactly about this very setup. So we've got our beautiful setup that we love, where orange moves above green, green comes below, steel moves below cyan. Now, of course, cyan is below red, which is what always along. But hey, you look at it and you're like, okay, hey, ooh, I want to short this right now because I had positive extreme. Well, if you're going to short a positive extreme, you better be doing it up near the highs. That's number one. It's not going to do very much good for you doing it down at the lower part. So that the signaling happened fairly early in the bar. Yeah, you probably could have caught a portion of it, but it's a limited range, and you know that you're going to come to it, particularly when you see that you're that far above the magenta. It's not even close. Another setup happens right over here, same situation, a little bit better because you had a dip, but now what you're looking at is, hey, I'm going to make lower shakeout peaks on higher highs, higher price. Is that going to be the next attractive one? Does it really develop? We ended up with another one that happens right over here, where the steel moves below the cyan, even though we're still under red. And often what I find with this setup is once you move above the zero, you really need a break below the zero for it to really start to be a sell. That's something that if you really are more conservative and you want to ride some of these longer runs, easier way to do it, because that becomes a key level, and you're not going to get enough momentum to drive things down unless it breaks down. Or if it breaks above the 7.5 and then comes down and you get the signal as well, that would work as well. And so we started to move up towards that, and we got our first qualifying one where we dipped below right here. I don't know if I need to move the line to make it easier for you to see that one. Well, let's just move it to the middle of the chart first of all so we can get an idea where we're at. And if I slide that over, you can see the histogram well below the magenta at this particular point is kind of capped out. Now, this one didn't do a whole lot, again, because you're still relatively bullish confines. In fact, turned around pretty quick to cross back over for a buy right at the ABM. So it barely broke the ABM, pretty much got to the 76 right there, and then turned around back for and made another run. But what it's also letting you know is that because the histogram dropped much faster than any movement from the magenta, and then we started to make successively lower histograms on higher move, and boom, by the time the actual magenta broke below, you got a very clean signal. In fact, it was starting to work out right about here. The problem was you had the inverse. You had green rising and cyan falling, which is not a short. You needed to have this setup where it's crossing above like this. And in that particular case, you're also at the low. And that was at 2563-ish range. And then we proceeded to cascade it, just filling back positive extremes. We had already had this line from before. This was the breakout of the positive extreme right here. And that was the number. And boom, hits that. Doesn't hit the zero. Comes right to the algo line. Because that's what they were just filling back. They had created the divergence, took their gains, and took the advantage of it on the way back down again. So that's pretty straightforward. Now, at the end of the day, we'd sort of flattened out here at the bottom. We had dipped below the red line with that, but we kind of filled it all back in post-market. And again, that Alco was providing plenty of support, which it certainly has. And then we've popped up since then, and a little bit of a fade back. But I thought it was really important to put that in there because sometimes people look at the shakeout and you may or may not pay much attention to what's going on with it. And certainly adding that into Pink Bar to give you that clarity, because it just means that particularly if we can color the range, and that's what was to me interesting about setting up this Pink Bar adjustment, to have the coloring so that you can see it. This is what it we got a much more clarified than the conditions for these setup longs I'll have in there, and that will change the colors for those. So it's getting very close to completion. I don't know if I have it on this 5K. Yeah, it's on this one as well. So this is the one I had put up from a chart standpoint for you to look at, and you can clearly see that we were right within that mode, and boom. These were the identifiers. And I marked this one here, even though it should actually just be white because it's not really the signal. Because yes, you've got the orange pop, but the irony of it is that you get the orange pop with the green above. So no, and you didn't even get the steel coming above and back down below. Neither did you here, but you're already below. Once you move below it, then a regular DOC spread, it's fine. You could have reacted to this one in general because this was also well below, and that was the same one I pointed out just a second ago. So there's some subtle variations, but you can see in this particular case it stays with trend much longer until there's some kind of breakout, and then making certain adjustments that will lower that on P2 buy configurations that fit within the parameters, and that way you just don't have to spend as much time understanding the DOC readings and that. Though I think it's important because it gives you an idea of the relationship and the dynamic of what's happening, so that you can really get an idea of what you're seeing, as opposed to just randomly relying on a color. But that's fine too, because that'll work as well. I mean, when you can collect your 90 plus points with that move. Also pretty much made quite a few adjustments for the 50K buy strategy, and that's going to eliminate a lot of false signals. Some of these that it buys at we wouldn't necessarily consider a buy with our understanding of the added orange line. This was done long before then. So with those modifications, I think it's going to be an exciting program, and one that's easy to follow. It's, some people will say to me, well, why do you just trade the ES? Because this is so easy. It's, well, why not? There's no need to get into anything more difficult. This does just about everything you could possibly want. And from a return standpoint, it's exponential with that leverage. So I think it's just the way to go. I don't really care what time frame you prefer. Some people like to go further away in time. That's fine if you're not paying attention to the market as much. I'm always a fan of being close, but not so close that you can't really see a trend mode or anything like that. The 5K has been pretty much within that broader spectrum. I think that we're getting to the point where we pretty much can effectively see broader trend on the outside, as well as maintain the tight inside control. So all good. As always, though, I'll keep putting up unique features like these on the Skype chat, and that's just to expand what we're looking at. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk to you later.